Hi guys, and welcome to bonus class number 4. Okay, and I apologise if there's any background noise, which is a bit disturbing. I'm actually travelling, doing some training in Rio, and the hotel where I am is in a fairly noisy place. Anyway, I'll do my best. All right. So just a little recap of our methodology. So we recommend students study for at least around 350 hours. Okay. The prep course, including the revision phase, so we have teaching, revision and consolidation through practice exams, is around 100 hours, which you can see at the bottom here, steps 1 to 4. Okay, you've got all the numbers of how many hours are in each class there. And then at the top, we've got a summary of how you should be allocating this 350 hours. Okay, so we've got the classroom course here. Pre-course reading around 50 hours, which is what we're focusing on in bonus classes to help guide you through that. Suggested extra study time up until the end of April while the course is going on, the teaching course. And then we've got revision time allowance, which is the time you should be studying during May, basically, next year, which is when we actually have the revision course as well, okay, revision phase of the prep course. So how does it work? We've had a Getting Started class already, which is recorded. You can watch that. Plus, this is the 4th of 5 free bonus classes, which are based on the pre-course reading of 50 hours you should be doing. Okay. We've got the learning phase of the course, which is 63 hours, 21 classes of 3 hours each. We have success in the exam classes where we give you tips on using your calculator and tips on planning your time, your study time to be more effective. We have then got the practice phase, which is the revision course, 21 hours. There are 7 classes here, and we go over the key concepts that you need for the exam and do lots of practice questions, okay, in class. And then we've got consolidation through practice exams, and we actually have one halfway there exam covering half of the content, which you do halfway through the learning phase of the course, step 2 here. And then we've got one full exam, which you do just before the revision course starts, okay, to identify your weaknesses and strengths, and that's a 6-hour exam. So you've got 3 hours and then 3 hours, just like you will have in the final exam. Okay, and we also have exam debrief classes, which go through the areas that students found particularly difficult in the exam, so you don't make the same mistakes again. So in the classroom, we're going to cover the really conceptual material, the core material that is fundamental to finance. So this material is pretty much definitely going to come up in the exam because it's so important. Okay, we've got CAPM, capital asset pricing model, yield to maturity, net present value and IRR, elasticity, LIFO and FIFO, to do with inventory accounting. And the non-core subjects, which are less important, they're more factual, things you should know. You need to know you might pick up 1 or 2, maybe more, extra marks in each topic area if you know this factual material. So it will help you. Okay. In the classroom, we can't add too much value to this, okay, because a lot of it is just about learning. For example, learning the different types of auction markets, knowing what Dow theory is, learning what structured notes are, CPI, histograms, okay. So each individual item here is less frequently examined than the core topics, but the exam will have a significant number of questions from these topics. So if you can read more broadly, which is what the aim of the pre-course reading is, it will help you to pick up extra marks in the exams. Once we start the course in January, at the end of January, you won't have much time to do this more factual reading. You will be very focused on these core concepts. So the more you can do before the course starts in January, better. Okay, so what are the benefits of the course? Resource planning. Okay, that's what we're doing right now. That's why we have these bonus classes to help you get started. Because we always see that the students who pass the exam are the ones who start earlier, okay, who plan their time and have the discipline or follow the course so they get the discipline in order to keep on track with their studies. Okay. So you need to find a time that works for you to study. For example, I used to study on Saturday for 8 hours. It was basically an additional working day when I just studied. It could be that you are a morning person, you study best before work, maybe you want the weekends off, so you just study before work or after work or at lunchtime or whatever works for you. You just need to make sure you find a time and try to create a routine so you don't really need to think about it, it just becomes automatic. And you need the discipline to stick to that, okay, which is why routine helps, because the routine, you don't need to, you just do it automatically. You don't need to say to yourself, oh, I should study now, oh, but I don't feel like it, okay? You just automatically do it because it's your routine. So you study every morning, you know, 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. to 9 or something. Maybe once you get to the office even, okay, but it needs to become a routine. Focus. So that's about focusing on the most important concepts for the exam, which we will help you to identify in the course. Okay. Practicing. Okay. So making sure that you're doing enough practice questions on most highly examined concepts. We do a lot of that in class as well, particularly in the revision phase of the course, which is a question-based classroom course, so question-based revision course. Okay, because we have the teaching phase where we teach, and we do some practice questions in that as well. And then we have the revision phase of the course where we are basically just doing a high-level recap of each topic area, but really focusing on doing practice questions, working through them in class with the teacher. Okay, and then we have review, so we will help to review your performance through practice exams and help you to identify where you're going wrong and why, so you can improve. Okay, so those are the benefits of the course. And here we go, we're here, 16th of December, okay, class 4. So you should already have done the equity reading, okay, and today, if anyone has had any questions about equity, I would have been going through them, but I didn't get any questions, so I would encourage you, please, to give me your questions before the next class, and they can be on any of the topic areas, okay. Just let me know if you would like me to go through something. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today is what you should be studying before the next class on the 20th of January. So we have the reading on derivatives and alternatives, which should be done before the class on the 20th of January, so that you can ask me any questions you have. Okay, and then on the 30th of January, the prep course starts. Okay, so this is just a summary of the pre-course reading, which you have in your study plans. So we've got the study sessions here, the reading number here, the importance of the reading. You can see we've got 3 critical readings here. Out of 4, there are 4 in total that are critical. Title of the reading, suggested number of hours in total, number of hours spent doing the pre-course reading. So there are some parts of these chapters, for example, the ethics one. The reason why we have 10 hours here and just 3 hours in the pre-course reading is because we will come back to ethics. We will spend more time on ethics later in the course, okay, or during the course. So you'll do additional practice questions at home. Also, you will have the teaching in the course and the revision in the course. So, and this is the bonus class that covers that particular material. Okay, so bonus class here 4, okay, is when we would be talking about any issues we've had with equity, okay, and setting you up with the reading for class 5, okay, which cover derivatives and alternatives. So as I mentioned before, the core material and the most highly examined concepts are covered during the course. The factual material and the non-core material is separate home study. So, for example, with ethics, you know, the idea with this is to do the pre-course reading, have an idea about ethics before you come to the course, but we will spend time on that in the course as well, okay? There are other areas, for example, I talked about equity in the last class to get you set up for the prepared to do the pre-course reading. There's a lot of factual material here. So market organisation and structure is all about the equity market. And what do we have? What kind of markets do we have? We've got the FTSE 100, for example. We've got a whole load of different equity markets all around the world, exchanges. Also, we've got different types of shares. So these readings on equity will go into the different types of shares. What is preference shares? What type of preference shares do we have? We have cumulative preference shares, non-cumulative, irredeemable, irredeemable. Okay, so these are all definitions that you need to know. So you should all have the study plan. and the Getting Started guide. We've been sending that to people who have signed up for the bonus classes. And that study guide in particular gives you guidance on the pre-course reading, okay, which you should spend a minimum of 25 hours on, between 25 and 52. Okay. And we will support you with any questions that you have. So we have a WhatsApp group for you to ask questions in. You can also send them by email, or you can ask them in these classes. And we will have a little quiz and a test on the pre-course reading during the first part of the course, so make sure you're prepared. How should you approach the readings? Review the learning outcome statements at the beginning of the reading. Work through the reading, focusing on the learning outcome statements. Okay, try not to get lost in the reading. You need to be very focused and keep reminding yourself of the learning outcome statement. Answer the questions at the end of the reading within 24 hours of completing the reading. That's so you don't forget the material. You need to work with it so you don't forget it. And mark any questions you got wrong so you can return later. Okay, it doesn't need to necessarily be soon, but if you can return, you can at least mark the questions you got wrong, and then you can go back to them during the course or in the revision phase, okay, whenever you have time. Also, people often find it quite effective to not just study one topic when you sit down, but to study several topics. So, for example, you might want to start, each time you sit down to study, you might want to start by doing a couple of equity questions, or a couple of ethics questions, then study equity, and then go back to quants and do a question or two in quants, okay? It makes the study more interesting for you, and it also ensures that you don't forget what you have previously studied. Okay, so a bit on derivatives then, just an introduction. So derivatives is 5% of the exam. Okay, you've got one study session called derivatives and 2 readings in that study session. Okay, now the readings they are a little bit technical. They are very wordy, so there's a lot of text, and actually, surprisingly, you don't have to do very many calculations for derivatives. But you do need to understand how they are priced and the theory behind derivatives. So it could be that you find it easier to wait until the course starts in order to have a teacher and instructor explaining how the instruments and markets work, as it says here. But you can make a start with reading 56, okay, which gives an overview of derivative markets and the main types of derivatives. So it just defines them. It's quite a good reading to look at. It's not too long, okay, so it is worth spending a bit of time on that. Okay, basics of derivative pricing and valuation is slightly more complex. In the course, we will do 1 3-hour class on derivatives, plus the exam debrief and plus a revision class as well. And just so you know, what is a derivative? So it's a financial instrument, okay, which basically means a contract. It derives its values from the contractual terms, and the value of the derivative is determined by the performance of an underlying asset. So, for example, an option to buy a share. If the option says you can buy a share for $10, then the value of that option is defined or determined by the value of the underlying share you can buy. So if the share price is $12 and you have an option to buy it for 10, then that option has some value for you because you can buy a share worth $12 for $10, the exercise price. Okay? So this is how the derivative, the share option, derives its value from the underlying asset, the share in this case. And we've got different types of derivative contracts. So we've got forward commitments and contingent claims. In forward commitments, we have a firm agreement. Okay? So the parties agree to a transaction now, but delivery and payment is in the future. Okay? Forward, futures, and swaps. Forwards, that's an agreement, a commitment to buy or sell the underlying asset in the future. Okay? Forwards are agreed between individual counterparties, okay, and they are not on the exchange. Okay, they have their own specific terms and conditions which are specifically agreed by the parties, involved in the forward agreement. Futures are exchange traded, so we call forwards over the counter. Okay, they were agreed over the counter, OTC, by the counterparty. Futures are exchange traded, which means they are standard. They're similar to forwards in that they're an agreement to buy or sell the underlying asset in the future, but they are for standard amounts of a standard commodity over a standard time period. Okay? So they're not tailored to the individual needs of the counterparty. Okay, they're exchange traded. And then we have swaps, which are like a series of forwards. Okay, so you have more than one agreement to buy or sell an underlying asset in the future. Okay, so for example, we could have an interest rate swap where you receive a fixed rate of interest at set dates, particular dates in the future. Okay. And then we have contingent claims, so that's where one party has the right but not the obligation, a right. So this is different, it's not an agreement, a binding agreement. It's a right. The buyer of the option has the right but not the obligation, i.e. that means they have a choice to buy or sell an asset in the future at a price agreed now. So options and credit default swaps are examples of that. Okay, so an option, the option holder, the buyer of the option, doesn't have to exercise it. They have the right to, and they will only exercise it if it makes economic sense to exercise it. Whereas with a forward commitment, you have to exercise it. You have to follow through on what was agreed, even if it means you make a loss. Okay, so quite different types of derivatives, forward commitments and contingent claims. Credit default swaps give you a payment if you're the long, if you bought the credit default swap, if there is a credit event. Okay, so we'll go through that in the course. There's an introduction in chapter 56, reading 56. So have a look at that, look at the definitions, okay? And then we have alternative investments, which is just 4% of the exam, quite an interesting 4% though, and it covers a lot of different areas. So we have investment, investment companies, real estate, private equity, hedge funds, commodities and infrastructure, all covered in this reading, okay? Study session 18, reading 58, which is the last reading in the CFA curriculum. Introduction to alternative investments. So these alternative investments, they can be possible portfolio diversifiers, okay, if their risk and returns, the returns are not highly correlated with the existing assets in the portfolio. Quite often they're a good hedge against inflation. So for example, commodity prices tend to increase with inflation, actually drive inflation. So that can be a good way of protecting your portfolio from inflation. You can also get high returns, for example, from private equity investments, but you have low liquidity and quite high risk. So we need to carefully consider these different components. So due to the low weighting of this topic in the exam, we don't spend very much time on it in class. We have 1 3-hour class, okay, plus the exam debrief and a revision, part of a revision class on it. But it's worth you making a head start on reading 58. It's well written. There's a lot of information, and it's in fairly straightforward language, so it's not too difficult to read. Again, focus on the learning outcome statement and try not to spend more than 4 hours on this reading. It would be easy to spend more time because it's a long reading and there's a lot of information, but just try to focus on the learning outcome statement. And you don't need to know everything. Okay? Just make sure you can achieve the learning outcome statement. And these are the key points in the reading. There is actually only one calculation, which is hedge fund fees. So you need to make sure you are able to calculate the hedge fund fee calculation. If you're able to do all of the calculations that are in the reading, you will be okay for the exam. Okay, so spend some time there. Do make sure you work through the examples and the practice questions on the hedge fund fee calculations. And you need to understand what things like a high watermark mean and how that impacts your calculation. Key points. So understanding the features of alternatives. How are alternatives different to traditional investments? Traditional investments are equity and fixed income. How are alternatives different? Well, liquidity, absolute return. Could be that they're not highly correlated with traditional investments. Okay, so you need to understand that. Understand the terminology, the risks, benefits, and fee structures of hedge funds, private equity, real estate, commodities, infrastructure. Okay, and then also just be aware there are other types of alternatives. For example, fine wine, art, stamps, and intangibles such as patents, which are not covered in the reading, but they're mentioned. Okay, the key ones you need to know about the different types of hedge funds, and we have different categories of hedge funds, which are explained in the reading. Private equity, real estate. Okay, we can have direct and indirect investments in real estate, depending on if we buy shares in real estate companies or if we directly invest in buildings and land. Commodities, okay, so metals, for example, infrastructure projects, okay, so lots of useful, interesting information in this chapter, in this reading. Okay, just a little recap of the equity readings, which you should have done already. So equity is 10% of the exam. The pre-course readings are the ones with the number of hours here. Okay, so we've got market organization and structure, market efficiency, efficient market size hypothesis, overview of equity securities, which has definitions of different types of equity securities, and introduction to industry and company analysis, so quarters, 5 courses, SWOT, etc., which many of you probably have already studied. So make sure you do those readings if you haven't already, and let me know if you have any questions. So keep up the studying. As I said, please send us your questions. We're here to help you and support you with the study process. But of course, we need you to be doing your part, which is the pre-course reading, asking questions, interacting, and we're available to help, okay? So keep up the studying, as I said, and we'll see you at the next bonus class, the last one actually, on the 20th of January. Thank you. Bye.